The Star Wars universe itself, as a whole, was very phenomenal since from the very beginning. Many people were invested into it as early as before, and some people even now are still interested. The first movie that ever came out, which was The New Hope, came out as early as 1977, while the most latest movie, which was also in May, had released in 2020. Now, of course, not every single film and trilogy was treated the exact same way. Some fans hated it, some fans loved it. Some might even argue that ever since 1977, there was not many more Star Wars movie things to come. Well, today I wanted to talk about the Star Wars Experience, what people, and most likely fans, had to tell about each trilogy, and also include my own opinion. I will be excluding the shows from this video, but all I'm gonna say is that most of the shows that came out in recent days did not have the best, I guess the best press from the fans. Some people liked them, and most people thought them as average or even worse than before. So, without over ado, let's jump right into the original trilogy of the first movie ever made. When the first movie came out, people all over the world have loved it. Even though it was originally intended for kids, it had captured a wider audience than it was originally anticipated. And it received a lot of acclaims and even some awards, especially for the storytelling, the actors, the characters, and the writing. Of course, now though it's such a very old movie, it does not always stand up, especially the fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, especially like knowing what these two characters later are known as, it's just not a good representation of them. Especially when Obi-Wan is around 360, I would not really say that's, a good depiction of the characters themselves. My favorite part of the actual movie though, itself, is the trench run. It just has good effects and it leads up to the big explosive moment. Overall, people back then loved it and they still love it. And in my opinion, it's a very good and decent Star Wars movie. While it might not be my favorite, it will definitely be a part of my memory for the longest time. But no one saw it coming when the next one came out. Basically, when this movie came out, people did not know what to think. They were taken on a ride. They were shocked and they were on an emotional roller coaster, man. I mean, it was a lot of buzz around this movie. It was amazing. When people first watched it, they were taken back and they thought it was the best Star Wars movie, and some people still think in current media. Of course, though, before we talk about that, let's talk about two scenes that I think describe this movie pretty well and are pretty well known. First off, the Han Solo phrasing scene. We all know that this scene originally was not gonna have as good dialogue, but the actors actually told George Lucas about how they would actually act, which makes this scene so much more better. And to telling, of all the people watching, that it set the precedence that for once the good guys might lose. Of course, we can't talk about that scene without talking about the infamous scene. First of all, Luke gets his whole hand chopped off. I mean, pretty simple, just like that, with no hesitation whatsoever. But then, just at the very end, whenever Luke and Darth Vader have this monologue, Darth Vader brings up of how he doesn't know who killed his father, and then Luke's like, "No, I know that you killed him." And then Darth Vader drops one of the biggest lines in cinema history. "No, I am your father." It probably got the people who first watched it back in the 1990s or 1980s to be shocked. They were shocked when this happened. Jesus. It's still taking the world by a storm. People still recognize it as one of the most iconic scenes of film history, which is just crazy to think about. Now, I'm not gonna get too deep into the story, but I'm just gonna say a couple things. First of all, this is the only Star Wars story so far, because obviously there's only one movie, where the good guys actually lose. The Luke Skywalker loses his hand, he gets defeated, Kong gets stolen away, the bad guys are the good guys are destroyed. We also meet Yoda, which is amazing, adorable, and then we know him as the amazing green puppet that we all know and love. Personally, I really like this movie, which makes sense. Obviously, it has very decent plot, decent characters. It actually aged very well. It's like still very good. I think anyone could watch it. It's my third favorite Star Wars movie. Now I know, please don't kill me. But I'll reveal the other top two like in just a minute. But I love the Star Wars fans on this one. Like, it's a very great addition to the series, and honestly, the most important movie. But now, let's move on to the favorite of my trilogy. When Return of the Jedi had finally come out, people were excited to see where the story goes and how the story concludes itself. And honestly, people were like very hyped up for this movie, especially knowing how Empire Strikes Back ended. They were just dying to see more. I think it is safe to say that most people enjoyed the ending and had a very satisfying conclusion. Most people, though, still agree that The Empire Strikes Back is the best movie out of this whole trilogy. And this movie, while it was not better in their minds than Empire Strikes Back, most people don't have much negative things to say, but they do like to say that it was the weakest out of all of them. And also it introduced Palpatine for the very first time, and he was very maniacal and evil, and people loved Ian McDermott playing as him. Obviously, though, as a conclusion itself, like, well, why was it a good conclusion? Because we had finally seen the whole story of Luke Skywalker, who noticed that his father, Darth Vader, was before a Jedi just like him, and he tried his best to turn him back to the light side because he saw the good in his father, the conflict in there. The scene with him, Darth Vader, Emperor Palpatine, is probably one of the best moments in Star Wars, and just seeing Darth Vader's redemption was very satisfying and honestly very touchy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I was also in tears. If you ask my opinion, I think this is the best out of all of the Star Wars movies in this trilogy. I understand I'm maybe in the minority opinion that this is the strongest, but I personally had the biggest feels for it. Overall, as a trilogy, it has a great start, great middle, and a strong finish. It doesn't falter at all during this trilogy. Overall, The Return of the Jedi has very great moments, great character developments, and a great ending. Of course, though, it will be some years until the new trilogies came out, and that's when it will start to go downhill. When this first movie of the new trilogy came out, everyone was excited to see Star Wars show up once again in the big cinema. This was 1999, by the way. But after they watched the movie, most people did not like it, like, at all. Number one problem was because of CGI and also Jar Jar Binks. They didn't like either of those things. They thought the CGI was a bit abhorrent, bad, ugly, and a bit too much. And number two, because Jar Jar was just a very annoying character and no one liked to see him on screen, essentially. The whole point of starting this new trilogy, though, is supposed to introduce how Anakin Skywalker rose and then fell to become Darth Vader. Basically, his whole story arc. So that's why you see Obi-Wan Kenobi in a very nice, old, and well, not old, young manner with his master Qui-Gon Jinn. So basically, this is the story of Anakin Skywalker. This was the first movie that introduced us to it. The pod racing, though, well, I think everyone can agree that one was pretty good. But one thing that one part no one ever disagrees on is Duel of the Fates, one of the best fights in Star Wars till now even. And it's just it's amazing. Choreography is very good, the attention is good, the music is amazing, the effects of the lightsabers are amazing as well too, and the force powers. And we all know how the fight ends, obviously. We know that Qui-Gon Jinn gets stabbed towards the end, and Obi-Wan, defeats Darth Maul, comes back in the Clone Wars. And he ends up the one who was betrayed Anakin to become the Jedi and eventually the Sith that we all know and love. Now, here's the thing. While most people might have hated it back then and still hate it now, I will say this. Even when I watched it first as a young lad and also when I rewatched it very recently, I do think that the hate gets overwhelmed. It's not that bad of a movie. The plot short maybe is a bit boring with politics, but it's very central, and honestly, it's not that bad. It's very interesting, actually, in my opinion. Comment down below if you disagree. It's fine. I'll read it. But I do actually think that the hate gets is way overblown. It's not that bad of a film. and if anything, it's a very great opening to this new trilogy. Now, moving on to the second one. When the second one came out, honestly, just to keep it very frank and short, it had the same energy and response compared to the first one. Some people thought it was worse than the first one, some people thought it was better than the first one, but overall, people who also saw it also had a very negative view about this movie. Like, it was basically the same story in some sorts. Some people say that's the good stuff. That one movie was Christopher Lee's Count Dooku, obviously, and maybe some Obi-Wan stuff, because Ewan McGregor wasn't the best part of the prequels, and I agree with that as well. But if there's one thing that I think is the best part about the movie, is the Geonosian arena. That part is just very good. It looks well. You have Samuel L. Jackson there with his purple lightsaber talking out like that. It's definitely one of the best scenes in the movie. It has all these Jedi fighting this droid army, and it's just simply amazing. I love it, and I'm pretty sure other people like this scene the most out of this movie as well. Of course, though, there's still lightsaber duels between Anakin and Obi-Wan with Count Dooku, and well, I think we're pretty sure we know how that one's gonna end pretty soon. Hayden Christensen was playing Anakin Skywalker in this movie, and I don't think it was a bad choice, but I think the love scenes in this movie are definitely not the best. Even I can say that the love scenes did not exactly appeal to me as a viewer as well. This is did come out of nowhere, And Count Dooku, as slick as he is, he's gonna be like, "Ooh, I got you now." So he cuts off his whole arm, boom, just like that. But the second part, or even the best part of the movie, aside from Geonosian Arena, is Yoda versus Count Dooku. That whole fight scene is just top notch, perfect, amazing. Now I'm gonna just run a quick thing. This is supposed to be the start of Darth Vader, basically how he became it. We can see the dark side rising in him, because when his mom died, he goes and kills all the Tuskens, not just the man, but the children too, and the women, all that stuff. And also we have the famous "I don't like sand" line, the famous line, of course. Well, overall in all, it sets up the Clone Wars pretty well. It shows that this was planned by Emperor Palpatine, I guess Chancellor Palpatine, from the beginning, So the story is also good, and in my personal opinion, better than the first one, and I also really like it. So yeah, it's not as bad, really. But moving on now to the best of the prequels. When Revenge of the Sith finally came out, as with along with the other prequels, people hated this one the least. But nowadays, actually, people prefer this one as one of their favorite Star Wars movie of the prequels, because it's actually a pretty great movie. Anyways, one of the best things is the opening scene. It's just a whole fight between fighters and stuff like that, spaceship battle. You get also introduced to General Grievous in that whole opening scene and stuff like that. And you also get to see of how Anakin has grown through this whole war and stuff like that. The story is one of actually a very great conclusion to Anakin's arc, but also of this whole trilogy, which I'll talk more about in a second. In this movie, you get to actually see the return of Anakin Skywalker. Now, this is not meant to be a movie review, this is just just to give you some context, but damn, it was very, very sad. The ending was really sad. It actually works, especially if you know what's gonna happen, but I'll touch that more in a second. The choreography in this film was also top notch. They had one of the best fights in the series, which we'll also talk about more in a second. Actually, no, we'll talk about it now. Anakin and Obi-Wan fighting, that was amazing, pure gold. Mace Windu and Palpatine fight was also really, really great. It was, even though I think could have been better, knowing what they had original plans, it was good. Obi-Wan and General Grievous was also great. The Count Dooku versus Anakin, well, Obi-Wan Anakin was very good, that as well. Now, what do I think overall as a trilogy? I think this movie has an amazing conclusion. It shows you the rise of a very young, small boy to how he turned into Darth Vader. It's a perfect character arc. because he was okay. I'm not gonna like talk more about it, but let's just say the Jedi Council was at fault. Um, Order 66, that whole sequence was very like actually depressing and also worked very well. You see all these like Jedi's die and it actually really hurt you. Now, Obi-Wan and Anakin's fight, like the last scene, like Anakin and Obi-Wan, like, he's like, you were my brother, I loved you, like that actually hurt my heartstrings, like you could feel it. Obviously, if you watch the Clone Wars, it even hits even harder overall. Now, what do I think of this whole trilogy as a whole? In my personal opinion, this is my Star Wars movie. This is my number one, with Return of the Jedi being number two, and Empire Strikes Back number three. I don't care if Empire Strikes Back is maybe a more structured movie, it's more important. This is my Star Wars movie. I don't care what you say. It's amazing, has good fights, has the best fight in the series, great characters, and stuff like that. I think that most people will eventually start to learn to appreciate this new trilogy because it completes the full circle of even Luke and Leia's story. It's a great addition by George Lucas, and I really, really love it. But now let's talk about the more recent installments. When Rogue One first came out, people still do, and also back then, think this is a very great Star Wars story. And honestly, so do I. I'll be honest, these next two movies will be reviewed pretty quickly because it's been a while since I've watched them, so this is what I'm saying from what I remember. Rogue One has a great Star Wars story that's a great precursor to Episode 4, and essentially the Death Star plans and stuff like that. And it's kind of sad that they all die in the end, but yeah, there's nothing much else I want to add except it's good. Solo Star Wars story, however, on the other hand, I would say is I'll be honest, I think Rogue One, in my opinion, is the last good Star Wars movie that they did. Like this one, it's just painfully average for me, and so the people mostly didn't go to see this, mostly because of another movie which we'll cover very, very soon. You can bet on that. I just think that after Rogue One, that's when it started to, kind of decline in quality. Well, I guess after maybe another movie, which we'll get to. But like Darth Maul coming back just for the tease, like come on, really? I mean, I completely forgot this movie existed until I started to make this video. I guess it just shows how much, it's, resounded with me. But if you like it, that's fine. But now, let's move on to the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. Whenever The First Awakens came out, people were taken back just to see another Star Wars movie after so long ago. This movie was the introduction of this new trilogy, and most people were very excited for the rest of the trilogy because they loved this movie when it first came out. Nowadays, though, people can't really watch it because of what the sequel trilogy would have later become. But I'm here to mostly talk about why I think this movie itself maybe only got excited is because we wanted to see the old Star Wars back. First of all, I watched a bonus video myself about this movie, because I watched this very recently actually, just to make sure I'm up to date, and they wanted to make this feel like the original films, which I think might be its biggest downfall, because that's all it is. It's just a New Hope, but just with a brand paint basically. They make Han Solo look kind of like an idiot in my opinion. They make Chewie out there. They don't even have Luke. They don't even have like 30 seconds just for him to like look and take off his hood. I mean, like, come on. That's the character that most people want to see. That's what you gotta do to him. And Leia, she's also just there too, to be honest. Here's the thing. I would have understand they wanted to make this all new Star Wars with new characters, maybe continue into like what happened to the Empire. But if you're gonna include the old cast members as side characters, at least do them justice. And in my opinion, I don't think they did it that well. And even this first movie in of itself, like even by itself as a movie, which is part of a trilogy, Rey, the main character, beats Kylo Ren in their first fight. I mean, like, come on, what does she have left to conquer? When I first watched this movie, it honestly is an alright Star Wars movie. It's honestly not as great as people make it out to be. I think people just really want to see a Star Wars movie. In my personal opinion, I actually think it's the worst movie to start off a trilogy, but trust me, these next two movies are way worse, so this is the best they can have. Whenever The Last Jedi came out, I think you already know what I'm gonna say, so I'm just gonna say it. People hated this movie, and honestly, it's not a good Star Wars movie. Itself as a movie has some nice thematic themes, but it should not belong in Star Wars, you know? They did Luke Skywalker dirty. They basically made like all of them look like idiots, and they also had like a whole casino arc which had like no sense whatsoever. Yeah, people will not like this movie and never did like the movie. Like they didn't respect any of the characters, like whatsoever. And yes, this clip is repeating because if this movie doesn't care about the characters, then I won't care about the movie. Anyways, though, my personal opinion is that this is the second worst Star Wars movie of all time. Like, it's just very bad. It doesn't honor Star Wars, and the story itself is just relies on so much like people being dumb. It's just my there's so much people talking about this already, so I'm not gonna go over it. But that's how we all felt. But now let's go to the worst Star Wars movie. When The Rise of Skywalker came out, we thought, oh, it's J.J. Abrams, he might like maybe able to fix this. But just no. He made a script that makes no sense, somehow Palpatine returned, or like the whole plot just makes no sense. It's basically more like a video game than anything. It's just, it did not feel like Star Wars, man. It just felt like someone's fan fiction, which is the perfect word to do it. In my opinion, I think this is the worst movie, mostly just because, unlike The Last Jedi, this just has bad writing, just overall bad writing. Not even if it's not a Star Wars movie, it's just a bad movie, like really bad. If Lego can't make it, a good like story to follow, then you know it's bad. I'm sorry, it just really is. I was just so disappointed, cash grabbing by, having Ian McDermott back as Emperor Palpatine. It was a very sad day for all of us Star Wars fans. So, Star Wars started as a very high, a thing that everyone loved, and had propelled itself to something to expand on it. People maybe loved it or hated it, but we all still respect it, and now it's been nothing more than just a cash grab. I do believe that we can still make great stuff. Look at Clone Wars, Andor, Rebels, and even Mandalorian. It's possible. But I'll be honest, even if there's a bit of darkness, there's always a bit of hope out there for another good Star Wars thing. This was Magic Luigi. If you liked the video, you can subscribe, like, comment down below, even hit notifications. But this was the Star Wars experience. Aw man, I can't believe it. They're making another Star Wars about Rey. Oh my god.